Hey everybody, Mike here with Delta Faucet. Today I'm going to show you how to install a Delta Faucet R4707, a deck mount rough for Roman tubs. Now with this type of rough, the thickness of your deck can change your installation steps. So take a quick minute to estimate what your total deck thickness is. And what I mean by total deck thickness is from the bottom of your framing to the top of your finished deck surface, something like a solid stone or a tile. Now if the total thickness of your deck is more than 2.5 inches and the top surface layer is less than 2.5 inches, you're going to install the rough following the thick deck or thick tile steps. We're going to walk through those steps together here, so stay tuned. Now if on the other hand your deck is standard, meaning the total thickness of those deck materials is less than 2.5 inches, then we have a different video for that. And one last note, I'll be covering how to install this with and without a hand shower, so you can follow along no matter which version you have. Typically, you'd only be tackling this project if you're doing a bathroom remodel that's been taken all the way down to the studs, or you're doing new construction. Now, if you're tackling that complicated of a project, I'm guessing you have some DIY experience. Just keep in mind that every install is unique and building codes are different everywhere. So if you run into an issue or there are any steps of the install that you're uncomfortable with, I definitely recommend bringing in a professional for some extra help. But if you feel good with it, then let's get started and talk about what tools you're going to need. Then we can move on to the install. Okay, grab those tools and supplies and let's get started. All right, let's go ahead and start dropping in our end valves. Now, before I do that, I want to talk about the valve itself just for a second. You'll notice that there's two different types of tubes coming off the bottom. There's a corrugated one and then a smooth one. Now the corrugated one is going to end up bending back towards the spout, towards the middle of our rough here, and the smooth one is going to be our supply line from the exterior plumbing. So when I'm dropping these into place, I want to make sure that my corrugated line is always facing my spout. So this is my cold side. I'm going to go ahead and drop it into the correct hole here. And secondly, I'm going to grab the hot side. It looks identical to the cold side, except there's a sticker that will indicate which side is the hot. So we want to go ahead and make sure we get that on the left side. Once I get those in place, finally, I can drop in my spout adapter. Now, your spout adapter may look a little bit different. This is the hand shower version. The regular version doesn't have a little bit of this extra connection here at the bottom, but the mounting steps are still exactly the same. However, if you do have the hand shower version, there's a couple extra steps that we have to do right now, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. The first thing is, you'll notice there's a little thread on the bottom here. And what we need to do is connect our leader hose to the bottom of the thread. And there's two ends of the leader hose. There's one that doesn't have a gasket in it, and then one that does, but is also connected to a little test cap here. So I want the open end that doesn't have the gasket, and it's going to end up screwing right to the bottom of my spout adapter. Now before I do that, I want to make sure I'm adding a little bit of plumber's tape, call it about 3 to 5 wraps around here to make sure I'm getting a good watertight seal. And I'm going to use a crescent wrench to make sure things are nice and snug. As you do this plumber's tape, I want to make sure I'm wrapping it around in a clockwise direction because that will make sure that I'm tightening the tape as I tighten up my leader hose. Okay. Next, again, I'm going to take the open side of my leader hose, just thread it onto the bottom of my spout adapter. Then use my crescent wrench to give it a couple extra turns until I feel it get nice and tight. Okay, now I'm ready to drop in my spout adapter. Go ahead and feed the hose down through the hole and then put my spout adapter in place. Now there's really not a front and a back to the spout adapter, but just again, keep an eye on the hose to make sure you're going to have plenty of room to make all your connections down below. Okay. Now I've got those 3 valves in place. I'm going to go ahead and secure them down using these included wood screws, one on each side of both valves and then also the spout adapter. And I'm actually going to use my center line that I drew when I was drilling my holes earlier because that will help make sure I keep everything nice and straight and in line. Okay, that feels good and tight, so now I've got my 2 end valves and my spout adapter all installed. Next, I'm going to install my hand shower nest. Now again, if you're installing the model that doesn't have the hand shower, you can feel free to skip the next couple steps and just move forward and we'll pick you back up. Okay, now before installing this, I want to talk about the position of the nest itself. All right, so I've drilled my hand shower nest hole right here next to my end valve. And the important measurement to remember here is that my hole for my hand shower is within 16 inches on center of my spout. If that's the case, then I can use the attached leader hose. Now, if you decide that you'd rather locate the hand shower a little bit further away, Delta offers a 7-foot leader hose that really gives you the flexibility to locate the hand shower anywhere you want around your tub. So that's available for order. Okay, once I've got my location set, I'm going to go ahead and drop my nest into place. Now this hand shower nest is going to install similarly to what we did with the end valves and the spout adapter, although you'll notice this plate on the bottom is now going to turn 90 degrees with the screw holes kind of in line with the tub, facing towards it. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in. And also, this nest adapter does have a front and a back. Now I can tell the side I want towards the tub because it's this plastic piece that angles a little bit towards the tub this way. What that's going to do is when the hand shower is in place, make sure the water flows back into the tub and not somewhere else. All right, once I've got that located where I want it, I'm making sure it's good and square with the tub. I'm going to use the 2 additional screws to go ahead and screw it to my deck. Okay, that feels good and secure. So the last thing we have to do, I'm going to pick up the other end of my leader hose, and you'll see it has a test cap here on the top. I'm going to go ahead and unscrew that cap and set it off to the side for safekeeping. And now I'm going to feed the hose up underneath the hand shower nest. Now, I also think it's a good idea right now to check down inside there just to make sure you see that little gasket to make sure you're going to get a nice tight connection when you go to put on your finished trim. I've still got mine in there. So I can go ahead and feed it up from the bottom, through the nest body, and then out the top. Now once I've got a hold of it up above the deck, I'm going to take my test cap again and just re-screw it onto the top. It should thread pretty easy, so we don't want to cross-thread it or force it. And once that feels good and secure, I can let the leader hose go, and that cap will keep it from falling down below the deck. Okay. Now I've got all my valves in place, we can go ahead and move on to the next step. Now I can start connecting all the plumbing underneath my deck. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is connect my end valves to my spout adapter using the included T. I'm going to solder the T on the bottom of my spout adapter here, and then connect these corrugated tubes from the hot and the cold sides to the middle by bending them in there. Now again, these tubes are designed to be bent, but we still want to be careful that we're not going to kink it or break it in any way because that would cause a big issue. So once I connect those two to the middle, I'm going to begin by connecting my cold and my hot input sides. Now, I want to talk about the end valves for a second because the way they work is they're going to end up tightening up to the finished surface of your deck by moving down into the deck. So as these end valves sink, the input tube is also going to be dropping a little bit lower. So when I'm making my plumbing connections underneath, I want to make sure I'm leaving enough leeway that this dropping of the input tube and the valve itself isn't going to cause any issues down the road. Okay, so I've got everything planned out. I'm going to make sure nothing interferes with my leader hose as well. I'm going to get everything connected up, and then we'll be able to move on to the next step. All right, so I have all my plumbing complete underneath the deck, and now I can pressure test my system. So what I'm going to do is turn on the hot and the cold supplies to get some water running up to the rough valve itself. Now one thing I want to do is make sure that my end valves are in the open position to make sure that there's water running through each end valve, up to my spout adapter, and then through my leader hose. Now to do that, at the top of each end valve is a valve stem, and you'll notice that it has one side that's flat. So I want to make sure the flat sides are facing towards the tub. That ensures that they're open and water's running through the complete system. Okay, once I've done that, now I'm going to check all my connection points for any evidence of leaks. That includes my input tubes, all 3 sides of my T at the bottom of the spout adapter, and also my leader hose. Okay, if anything looks like it's leaking, now's the time to address it because this could be the last chance I get to easily do that. All right, everything in my system's looking pretty good, so I think we're free to move on to the next step. Okay, so that about wraps up things for this portion of the install. Now at this point, you'd let your other trades come in and finish putting on your deck material or maybe even installing your tub. However, I did want to show you a quick mock-up so you can have an idea of how this is all going to come together in the future, and also be sure you make your other trades aware while they do install this deck material. Now, the first thing I want to point out is that the buildup of this deck material above the framing cannot exceed 2.5 inches. We will make sure whatever material you're using always stays below the level of the underside of this washer. Secondly, I want to make sure that all material being installed is as tight to these cardboard tubes as possible. So a lot of times if you're drilling a large format tile or using a solid piece of stone, you're going to have to drill those holes to the correct diameter and then drop it down over the tubes. Now if you do have to drop down something over your spout adapter, your end valves, you're going to have to remove these washers. Now the washers all come out the same way. It's very simple. You just have to turn it 90 degrees so the notches line up with the notches in the stem or the valve, and then pull it up and off. And this will allow you access to drop that nice and tightly over the cardboard tube. To reinstall, just go ahead and put it back down over the valve and then turn it again 90 degrees to lock it into place. And the valve may drop a little bit, so just go ahead and hold it and then pull it up with a little bit of force to get it right back in that same retaining notch. Next, what we want to do is to trim our cardboard tubes to be either flush or just below the level of our finished deck surface. Now, to do this, I'm going to be using a utility knife, but really anything similar will work just fine. What I'm going to do is be cutting around the edge of the cardboard and then also making a slit up the side so I can easily pull it off. Now, the important thing here is making sure that we're not going to damage our deck surface, so just be very, very careful while you work your way around each of the valves and the spout adapter. All right, now that we have our cardboard trimmed, we can start tightening our components to the top of the deck. Now to do this, I'm going to rotate each one of my washers to line up with these two screws that you'll see. I've got one in the front and the back on each of my end valves and my spout adapter, and then one on each side on my shower handle nest if you have that. So I'm going to go ahead and move my washers to align with those screws. And when I do that, you might notice that your component drops down to the tub deck or drops a little bit. That's totally fine. What we're going to do now is begin tightening each one of these screws, and we want to tighten them evenly to prevent any binding. And as we tighten them, the entire body of the component is going to start sinking down into the deck. And eventually, the bottom side of this washer will be fully contacting the deck, and that's when we know things are going to be nice and secure to the top of our deck here. So I'm going to start by using a flathead screwdriver and then work my way back and forth between the two screws, trying to keep everything level as it sinks down into the deck itself. Okay, now I want to point out something real briefly here. You'll notice that my components here are starting to come at an angle, so it's also good to work component to component back and forth because everything's connected underneath and we want it to be dropping as a solid unit and not getting too off of an angle here. Okay, you can see we're getting pretty close here. Now before I tighten these up all the way, I do want to point out that we don't want to over tighten these because if we did, we might cause some damage to the top of our deck. Okay, those three feel pretty good and they're nice and snug. If I have the hand shower nest, I'm going to go ahead and tighten that down as well. All right, and again, I just want to snug that up. I don't want to over tighten it. Now, each one of my components feels like they're in great shape and they're not going to wiggle around, so we can go ahead and move on to installing our finished trim. That about wraps things up for the install of your deck-mounted Roman tub rough. All right, I hope everything went well with that install, and if you have any additional questions, you can always reach out to Delta Faucet's customer service team. They're more than happy to help.